Hi, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, we're talking about the Toxic Avenger. We're also talking about voting. Strangely enough, I wish it was like a timely topic for that.
Yeah.
Wish that the time aligned in that way, but delighted on this episode to be having a second chat with Matt Bors. Matt, how have you been?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. I've been good. I've been working on these two comics really all year, and they come out in the fall. So Toxic Avenger and then second volume of Justice Warriors.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I think you and I had a conversation about the first volume of Justice Warriors, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
I was wearing a hoodie that was matching the hoodie that your partner in crime was wearing, as I
Oh,
recall.
okay. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes. And so glad to talk about that book. Glad to talk about Toxic Avenger, of course. And we could sort of start with Toxie and then
Yeah.
work our way around. I'm curious about how you first. What was the meet cute moment with Toxie?
I was when I was a kid. So there's the original movies, of course, in the 80s. I think
Hmm.
the first one came out in 83 when I was born. It might have been 84. I didn't see it then, but I saw it definitely at a very young age, and it stuck in my head. In fact, the third one, I mean, I would have been renting all these, from the shop, and they didn't care, or
Oh
my
yeah.
dad didn't care how young I was. And I just remember there was, I think it's in the third one, he's like fighting some crooks that stick up a video store or something, and he sticks one of their hands into the rewind machine, and it just rips off his fingers, and then he starts ripping out his intestines. It's absurd. That stuck in my head. And then there was the cartoon that came out in 1991,
Mhm.
which I definitely watched when it was on the air. So I would have been a little kid then. And I don't really remember which I saw first. I may have seen the movie first, actually. I watched a lot of like rated R stuff when I was little. Um, but the cartoon was cool. It was part of this era of like turning a lot of R-rated and adult properties into kids cartoons, like RoboCop and Swamp Thing
Mhm.
had their cartoons. Ninja Turtles even was the original comic book is quite violent. It's not the same as the Saturday morning cartoon. So it was part of that milieu of mutants, and it was kind of like a cool Captain Planet. Like Captain Planet was really like earnest and had these like goody kids.
Mhm. Mhm.
And Toxic Avenger had it was about pollution and like environmental lessons more so than the movies for sure. And but it was like gross and action packed and stuff like that. So they always stuck with me as a cool thing. And then it kind of disappeared from pop culture for a long time. I mean, he did like a fourth one and at Trauma and all that.
Mhm.
So it was just in the back of my mind over the last couple of years of comics that I might want to work on that aren't my own, of like licensed comics, like what would I want to have a shot at if I could have a shot at something? There's like X-Men. I love X-Men, but I'm not getting called up by Marvel to take over the X-Men. But like Toxic Avenger, I found to my surprise a little bit that no one was really trying to do anything with it. There hadn't been a comic in 30 years. Marvel put out some comics in 1991. And then other than that, there was like a one-off thing a couple years ago, but that was it.
Wow. Yeah, you and I are about the same age. So as you're talking, I also remember going to the video store, renting like whatever RoboCop, and
Yeah.
I remember that whole movement because I had a Toxie action figure. You could have like an R-rated character as an action figure in like a kid's toy store, and it was just a thing. Like
Yeah.
here's Predator, spine-ripping action, whatever, you know. Like,
Yeah, yeah, great stuff. I had some Toxic Avenger RoboCop toys that kind of fired caps.
uh-huh,
I
uh-huh.
remember,
I
which
remember
they
those.
probably
Yeah.
wouldn't make those today. I
Bag
mean,
of
I
glass, kids. Here's your bag of glass. Sorry, go
I
ahead.
got a four and I got a 4 and a 7 year old, and just not even about violence or safety or anything like that, but just if they had toys with caps going off, I would just hate it. I'd be like, why would I buy my kid something like that?
Yeah, the
So
sound, the smell. Yeah.
Yeah, I can remember that smell too.
hmm
It's funny.
Yeah. So you said no one had really worked on this character in like 30 years. So how did the project come to be? How did you sort of, or were you approached?
No, no, I kind of conceived of it and went after it. So I had been, well, last year, almost a year ago to this day, the nib was winding down and ending.
hmm
And I had run that for 10 years. And I had known before the day it shut down for sure that it was, going to end. I mean, I forget, we announced it, maybe 3 or 4 months in advance. And I knew a few months before that. So I'd been, that was political cartooning and nonfiction comics, which I'd worked in for most of my adult life at that point. And I love that stuff, but I also had always had designs to do genre comics and mainstream comics. And I was sort of circling back to that and thinking about what I could do. I mean, Justice Warriors is creator owned project I do with Ben Clarkson.
hmm
That's really fun. But I'm just writing these titles, by the way, if it's not clear. Like I'm not drawing them. I do contribute some art, but I'm not the one that's drawing all the interior pages. So I can, it's not full time essentially. So with just writing, I was like, what could I kind of put my stamp on, and what do I have an idea for? What's attainable? And the Toxic Avenger kind of lined up with that. I mean, I'm real into mutants and dystopian stuff, and so anyway, I was at San Diego Comic Con last year for the first time in like 10 or 12 years, and the nib was up for an Eisner and all that, and it was just, I randomly came across the Troma booth and introduced myself to Lloyd Kaufman and just kind of, I didn't pitch him the particulars, but I said, I have an idea for a Toxic Avenger comic. I'd love to make this happen. And, he was kind of like, yeah, cool, great. Email me. And he gave me his card and all that, which, doesn't necessarily mean anything. But then I followed up and it all kind of came together pretty quickly. I wrote a big outline for this series, which is 5 issues, and then ideas for further ones. I have like a 4 to 5 issue or 4 to 5 volume story I really want to tell if this works out. And I sort of married Troma and Ahoy, my Justice Warriors publisher, to
hmm
like do the publishing and the business side of things and everything. And it all came together pretty easily, a lot easier than I think these things usually do, especially when you're working with like a big corporation or an estate or whoever owns a certain character. In this case, it was just Lloyd Kaufman and Michael Hertz, and they were making a new Toxic Avenger movie that is maybe not coming out now, but that was kind of a big deal in that it was done by Legendary Films and had A-list actors and stuff, so they actually spent money on it as opposed to the original Troma movies being like ultra low budget. um but in comics it's just sort of, they never pursued it, I guess. I don't know the reasoning, but to me I'm just like, oh, I'd rather do, I mean, I make comics, so obviously I think in comics, but to me it's a perfect property for a comic. It's violent, gross. It's kind of inherently a superhero parody. I'm surprised there hasn't been more done with it. So it's great. I get to kind of, I'm feeling clear. I'm not dealing with a ton of lore. I'm not the 700th Batman writer that's trying
hmm
to reinvigorate it. Maybe I would like to be someday, but it's nicer to, come on something. I have a new idea. It's a new story. It's kind of an updated version of Toxic Avenger, but I'm not really competing with a ton of other stuff. It doesn't have any relation to the 90s Marvel comics, and most people probably didn't read them or remember them.
Yeah, I've seen them online, and
Yeah.
I saw a little like image of, I think it's Peter Dinklage that was going to be in the Toxic Avenger movie, but
Yeah.
that's the last I've seen of it. As I was looking through the issue that you shared with me, I don't do spoilers at all, but I enjoyed kind of the aesthetic, the feel of it, because just looking through the panels, looking across the story, like it totally fits that universe. And I think it's Fred Harper
Yeah.
that does the art with you. So a really nice entry into the canon in that way too.
Yeah, Fred Harper has done a great job. Right now, I'm seeing art that he's done for issue 4, so we're getting closer to the end
Hmm.
on production, and he's getting better with every issue, honestly. And he's been around a while. He's done stuff for Ahoy. He's done, I mean, he's done. I think he's worked for all the major companies at one point. He's got a really good style for this. He's just good with the grotesque. He's got a real like detailed, inky, almost dirty style in a way.
Hmm.
So it's great. I love his version of Toxic Avenger, who's kind of like a he's physically imposing. He draws him really tall and really built.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned Ben Clarkson, and I'd said partner in crime, but
Yeah.
artist partner. And I'm curious about, as a writer, kind of the satire that you go after with something like Justice Warriors versus writing something like Toxie.
Yeah. Well, I suppose I don't know if they're similar approaches or not. I mean, the main difference, I guess, is that I'm co-writing Justice Warriors with Ben. So he's a big part of like he kind of originally created this universe and brought me in.
Mm,
He's the artist and the co-writer. But so with that, we're doing an election in Bubble City, which is
mm,
the perfect domed city that's crime free in this world of Justice Warriors, and it also deals with a lot of mutants, and it's mostly like a buddy cop drama. So you have these characters, Swamp and Shit, who are partners and mutants in the uninhabited zone, which is inhabited by millions of mutants, and of course, crime ridden. It surrounds Bubble City, and so we are doing an election in this city.
mm.
And I mean, it's like it's not really there's no one-to-one comparison with our election. No one's
Sure. Yeah.
Trump or anything like that, but it's commenting on really everything about elections, like from electioneering, how the media portrays things, elites clinging on to power, how votes are skewed or voting is made harder for certain populations. It's and at the same time trying to tell a good story. Really, what it is in a nutshell is it's our version of a political thriller, like a specifically like the '70s paranoid political thriller genre.
Hmm.
There's multiple assassination attempts, not just one, like our campaign right now. Well, who knows? There could be more. Knock on wood that there won't be. But um, it won't spoil much to say that the main plot of this is there's an election. There's two candidates vying for power within the bubble, and then a third party candidate comes out of the uninhabited zone, a mutant. And Swamp Cop is sort of sent undercover, COINTELPRO style, to infiltrate and discredit this movement. And
Uh,
so that's the main plot of the book. And I guess is what's the difference between writing this and Toxic Avenger? I don't know. I mean, in both I'm having fun and kind of writing, combining lowbrow pulpy comics with hopefully some meaty substance in there. I mean, Toxic Avenger is not they're both of them are not comics that take themselves too seriously, but they're also about things. The Toxic Avenger is ultimately an environmental satire, as it will become clear. Well, maybe pretty early on, but as the issues go on, you'll see more about of what I'm trying to do here. Uh, but it's also got a lot of gross stuff and violence and everything. So you have to be on board for that too.
Yeah, you were talking about the intestine pulling moment in Toxic Avenger, and my mind immediately went to one of the panels a little bit later in the book where there's some it's gutsy. We'll just say that it's very gutsy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and I don't think I'm not I don't consider myself like a gross out guy or a horror guy. So it's not really I'm not trying to go over the top or do anything crazy, but
Hmm.
it is the first issue actually isn't I don't think is that violent, but the second issue is a little over the top. And then I won't spoil what happens, but if you're into the gross stuff, issue number 2 is for you. That'll be the one that hopefully the trauma fans like. um the whole issue is kind of crazy, and then the plot continues, and I get into some of what's actually going on in this town. So there's a toxic waste spill, and uh, Toxie, of course, and a lot of his bullies are mutated. Um, I guess I should say then that I don't think I brought this up already, but the comic I'm doing is sort of taking a lot from the Toxic Crusaders cartoon
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
updating it. So this volume is mostly about the Toxic Avenger. But I think it will be clear, it won't spoil too much to say that by the end of it, you will see that we are pulling a lot of elements from the cartoon and hopefully setting up the Toxic Crusaders to exist.
Nice, nice. And I love how you're weaving all of that together, and the feel is very um, sort of film meets that as well. So lots of good mixing and mingling of the influences.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think I'm trying to take all the good stuff from the good stuff from Toxic Avenger. It's kind of this weird thing where a lot of people have fond memories of it, but
Hmm.
it's intentionally schlocky, and it's I think their term for it, I believe, is grade Z cinema.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
intentionally bad and low budget, but you can't really make a grade Z comic. I mean, some people do, but not intentionally. I don't think you can make a comic that you look at and go, "This is fun because it's bad."
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas, so I'm trying to do a good version of the Toxic Avenger high level comic without taking it too seriously. I mean, it has political undertones and a lot of relevant satire in it. Um, and to some extent, I'm like, I wonder if like there's a contingent of people who would get mad and say that the I'm making the Toxic Avenger woke or something, but it's not too over the top. I think it's just right in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, before I ask about where folks can connect and anything else that is on the horizon and you're creating, any shout outs to the creative team on either book? We talked about Fred Harper and Ben Clarkson, but anybody else that's been sort of the editorial or anything else like that that you'd like to
Well, I
mention?
mean, yeah, if we're talking editorial, I mean, Tom Pyre is my editor at Ahoy. I mean, and he's the editor on both these projects and has just been great to work with. And I mean, that company in general, they're a real small company, but like they treat creators good and they've been behind both of these projects. It's been great. Everybody I work with there is good. The publisher, Hart Seeley, and everything. And I don't know, all the full creative teams on the books. We talked about Fred Harper, Lee
Mhm.
Luffridge, as I believe how you pronounce his name,
Mhm.
Lowridge. Um, he's great. He colors a lot of books. Eisner nominated colorist. He may have won some before. I'm not even sure. He's great. He's doing a really good job on this. And Rob Steen is the letterer. And then on Justice Warriors, it's not just me and Ben. We have a colorist there too, Felipe Sombrero, who's excellent. And but then I letter it, we co-write it, Ben draws it. There's a lot of passing around of the responsibilities.
Mhm.
So yeah, no, I mean I'm lucky that I work with all these people. Like my bar for create my bar for working with people for collaborating in comics is that you have to be a better artist or colorist than me, which
Ah,
is
ah.
not the highest bar in the world, but it's not, but it's definitely not the lowest bar either. So because if I'm better than you, then I should just do the comic myself. But in the case of Ben Clarkson and Fred Harper, they're killing it on these books, and I think doing a better job than I would do. And I mean, same with everybody really. Like I'm not the world's most amazing colorist either. So it's good to work with people who are super good at what they do and feels like a true collaboration, as opposed to the more assembly line um way that some comics are made,
Mhm. Mhm.
like at the big two or whatever, like where you don't have any control over, I don't know, who your artist is or whatever. Fred I didn't know before this, but now we've become friends, and it's cool to talk to him about what he wants to draw, what he wants to do with this, and we make it work.
Cool, cool. Yeah. And Lee is probably currently coloring three books while we're having this conversation. He's probably somewhere like,
Yeah, I don't know how that guy is on so many books and keeps his quality up because it is good quality stuff. I mean,
yeah,
um, I don't know. I'm actually not in touch with Lee, but the pages look great, and I don't really have a lot of notes or anything because he knows what he's doing. So,
yeah, yeah. He came on for an episode and great conversation, really fun guy to talk to.
oh, I
So
should look it up because he's someone I've been, you know, I'm not the editor on the book, so I'm not in touch with everybody other than Fred and I talk. But like, um, yeah, I just see the pages when they come in and they look great. But yeah, he's the guy I'd like to know because he does an excellent job. I mean, I'm aware of his name because he is so on so many books. You know, I've seen him before.
yeah, yeah. Well, that last official question is anything new next as far as projects that you would like to mention that we've not mentioned? Any dream projects that you'd like to mention? And then the second part, maybe that's the third part, I don't know. Where can we go to find out more about you, your work, and the books?
Yeah. Well, let's see. I'll take them out of order. I think,
Perfect.
the main things I have right now are the Toxic Avenger and Justice Warriors Vote Harder. Um, those are both out in the fall. Justice Warriors Vote Harder comes out on 9/11. Uh, it'll be the best 9/11 you've ever had if you pre-order this book and get it for 9/11.
So, some
It's
joy on that day. Some joy.
exactly. Um, it's a coming out in a trade first, so it's basically 5 issues, 120 pages or so. Comes out in graphic novel format, and then the Toxic Avenger comes out October 10th. So ideally, listeners would call their comic shop and pre-order you buy them in single issues and tell them you want it and all that. Beyond that, I don't have a whole lot because those two projects have taken up a lot of my time. I mean, ideally, what is going to happen is there's going to be more Justice Warriors and more Toxic Avenger, but I don't think I will know that for sure until the initial sales come in and the publisher decides if there's going to be more volumes. But with both projects, I plan on, if I can, doing, like I said, 4 or 5 volumes of Toxic Avenger and really even more of Justice Warriors.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a short story that I wrote for Cruel Universe #4, which is the new EC Comics anthologies they have coming out
Oh,
from Oni.
love
So
it.
man, they have the horror one, and then Cruel Universe is like science fiction, and uh, I mean, I couldn't be happier, man. EC is a big deal to me.
Yeah.
So that it's been announced that I'm doing something, but what and uh, I don't even think the cover's been solicited, but I have the cover story basically, which I'm very happy about.
Nice, nice.
Beyond that, not much planned. Um, Hopefully, I'm doing more Justice Warriors and Toxic Avenger, like I said. But if I'm not, I have plenty of other ideas for comics that I would like to get to, both creator owned and mainstream stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
And you asked where people can find me. I'm on pretty much every major social media platform. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm just Matt Bors at most places, MATTBORS. Wherever you get your social media algorithms, you should follow me.
More
Yeah.
joy on social media, even.
Yeah. Who knew?
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned that you were sort of growing up, discovering comics the same time that I was. Do you remember the EC reprints in the mid to late 90s? Yeah, yeah.
Yep. I mean, I even feel like they were earlier. I was kind of curious about. I know a specific one I had that was the first one I got,
Mhm.
and it was Tales from the Crypt, and it was a story Jack Davis drew. It
Mhm.
might be called Shipwrecked or something, but basically it's it's like what is it? It's like a rat eats something, and then a mammal eats the rat, and then a guy eats the mammal. He's like starving, and then a shark eats him, and it creates this like stacked heads of these things eating each other. That was the first one I got, and I loved that stuff, man. I read it.
Mhm.
I was super young. That's why I think it even came out maybe before the mid '90s. I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, I guess I was 10 in '93. I don't know when it came out. but all I know is it was one of the first things I got, and from then on, I was like, it was. I got my dad pushed EC and Mad Magazine on me early,
Mhm.
and it was key to my development.
Yeah, yeah, you can't go wrong with some Jack Davis at all,
No,
at all. Well, Matt, it's been a wonderful talk. Always glad to have you, and may the conversation continue about future volumes of both Justice Warriors and Toxic Avenger.
yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much.